where we could be healed and we could be unified and we could be one people, no matter where you came from, no matter what you'd known in the past, no matter what your economic situation was, that all of us rested in the hand of God. And now we live in a land where, having forgotten the New Testament realities that were typified by the Old Testament sacrifice, we have those who stand up and speak as if they know what's right, as if they know what the law should be. And because of their ignorance and arrogance, shake their fist in the face of God. And we wonder why things aren't working out. Since the Ferguson riots, 44 policemen have been executed across this country. Romans tells us that these are the ministers of God. Many of them have been nothing short of executed in an execution style. Over 92 million people out of work. And a government afraid of the reaction of the people changed the method of tabulating the statistics to make it look as if our unemployment rate is 5.1%, when in reality, when we count those who simply have given up looking for a job, those who are underemployed, Shadow Stats records that the actual unemployment rate in our country is 22.1%. Many years ago, they called those numbers the Great Depression, where almost 50 million people are reliant on the government for their daily sustenance through entitlement programs. Where there are those who now have given up their dependence on God and look to the state to tell them what to think, what to believe, what is right, what is wrong. And then ultimately, those who cling to a relationship with Jesus now beginning to face what I heard about many years ago when I first got saved. I heard older Christians talking about the possibility of a time when persecution that we heard about in Old Testament days, New Testament Rome, in other countries would soon become a reality in our own. I didn't know what to think when I heard about that. But now I know of a woman who, because she agreed with what God said about marriage between one man and one woman, not conjecture, not the opinions of men, a simple reading of Corinthians, Deuteronomy 25, simply, quietly said, I cannot do this. Sits in jail today. Where a person whose livelihood was baking cakes, who was approached by a same-sex couple to cater a wedding for them. And she politely and quietly said, I don't want to offend you. I value you, but I can't do this. Gave them the names of others who would willingly do so. And is now at the rule of a court lost their livelihood and may well lose their home. Those who've been to church here before have heard me tell this story many times, but it has great significance in my heart. A class I had in seminary that at first I thought was going to be terribly boring was a history class. However, one morning, the professor of that class, Dr. Susie Stanley, closed the textbook and began to tell us a story that captured my undivided attention. She says, I want to tell you the truth about persecution. Said in the New Testament church, the time of the catacombs, the caves under Rome, the crypts, it was said among the people who worshipped Yeshua, Jesus, that you needed to be careful about who you told about your faith, because it may cost you if you're not being led by the Spirit of God and who you speak it to. As a matter of fact, they had a chance to see some things that we wouldn't be surprised at in the church today. They noticed a pattern. People who made a big deal and a show out of going out and sticking their finger in Rome's eye and intentionally getting caught at saying Christian things. Those people almost invariably, when they finally stood before a magistrate and were threatened with execution, recanted their faith, burned incense to the emperor, and swore allegiance to Caesar. They had a nickname for them. They called them spots. Do you ever hear anything in the New Testament where it talks about being without spot or wrinkle? Spots. Without hypocrisy. Without being a fake. But those universally who only at the last moment when there was no other way out stood quietly and for no purpose of causing disruption were caught in circumstances where they said, no, it's Jesus. Rome was in terrible fear that it was losing its legions. The salute from a Roman soldier, one would walk past another of superior grade and say, Caesar is Lord. The response was, the Lord is Caesar. They were getting saved, and conscience gripped them. And it was becoming common in the legion for one to walk past another and say, Caesar is Lord. And for the response to be, no, the Lord is Jesus. The government was in a panic. They made laws to assure loyalty. Sound familiar? A young woman from the catacombs by the name of Felicitas. You've heard me tell the story before. Very young woman, not known to be somebody who could speak up. We don't know anything about a husband. We know that she had just delivered a child. And the child was nursing, was caught up in a sweep for these Christian people in Rome. She went to the Colosseum where the people were being distracted with spectacle and bread. Spectacle and bread. In other words, high drama, not talking about the fact that the empire was crumbling because it was financially falling apart. They gave the people bread in the stands, and they gave them something outrageous to look at so that they wouldn't talk about what was happening financially. Felicitas and several others came into the arena. The crowd was stunned. As she walked into the arena to stand before the officials, she was nursing the child. The crowd took a very nasty tone, saying, "What is this?" You see, because that day was the day where the method of execution was to be ripped apart by animals. And the people in the stands began to murmur to themselves, saying, "Would the emperor really do this?" We were told that these people were seditious. We were told they were animals. You see, it was commonly reported in Rome that people who were Christians practiced incest. You know why they did it? Because they heard even husbands and wives call each other brother and sister. They considered it to be the most significant relationship they had, not their marriage. It was their relationship in Jesus. And they thought we practiced incest. It was taught that the reason that we held a first communion in private, because we took babies and put them in loaves of bread. And we would take the new initiate, the person who had been listening at an elder's house for a year before they said, "I want to commit to Jesus." And the elder would take a risk and take them to where the other believers were, knowing that if they were a spy, they were all headed for the arena. And the elder would pray, the congregation would seek God, and every time someone new came, they put their life on the line and trusted Jesus. They taught that when that new initiate came for their first communion, that they would give the initiate a knife, and when they plunged it into the bread to separate the bread, they killed the infant, and then they threatened them and said, "If you tell about us and what's really in Christianity, we will turn you over to the authorities for murder." They told the Roman people we were murderers, that we were intolerant. They told them we were murderers, that we engaged in incest. Oh my gosh. They lied about who Christians were.
Thank God they don't do that now.
Now they call us intolerant because we say marriage is one man and one woman. They embrace Islam. Those who are adherents of Islam, we just want to talk to people who are gay. We want to share with them what we found. We want them to have life that more abundantly. Adherents to Islam want them dead. Felicitas stands in the arena. The people in the stands are staring at this young woman nursing this child. And they're saying, are these the people we've heard these things about? The emperor, as it's recorded in Roman documents, the emperor sends a message to the guy who's officiating and says, "I don't care what you've got to do, you get her to recant, and you get her out of that arena. We're not going to do this." The man tries to reason with Felicitas, and she's so shaken she can't speak. The crowd is now yelling, "You cannot kill this woman and her child. This is wrong." He tells her, "If you'll just recant, if you will just say The emperor is right. If you'll just obey the law, you can go home and your child will be safe, and you can worship this Christus any way you like. She hung her head. It's recorded that tears ran down her cheek. And she just shook her head no. They sent out a soldier. He ripped the child from her arms. Milk still streaming down her breast. The crowd was incensed and screamed at the emperor, and in a rage he commanded the slaughter to begin, and they released the animals, and they tore Felicitas apart. However, there was a consequence. The people were so outraged. They so attacked members of the Senate. They put so much pressure on the empire that there was never another execution of a Christian in that arena. That government, like ours, tried to find mechanisms to bring peace in troubled times. They tried programs to feed the poor, and they failed. They tried urban renewal and a new way of living by burning portions of the ghettos in Rome and blaming Christians. They had a scapegoat. Our government has tried program after program, political solution after political solution. And when those solutions were in line with the Word of God for almost 200 years, they worked, we were prosperous, things were good, and we became one of the powerhouses of sending missionaries